So please use that to send any questions you might have. This event will be about an hour, and about halfway through, we'll turn to the questions. Now I want to welcome Lea. Lea, it's a great honor to have you join us. I'll forget about introducing you in any detail, as we've watched an excellent film about your life. But we're also joined by Dr. Nahla Abdo, originally from Nazareth and Haifa, who is a political activist and professor.
Go ahead, Arthur.
I know I got a little message on my screen. Did everyone, I guess?
It says being recorded. That's it. The
Okay.
event is being recorded. That's it.
Yeah. So Dr. Abdo has many publications and specializes on Palestine, Israel. There's more information about Nahla and about her publications on the chat, so you can take a look at that. Another fact about Nahla Abdo is that she was a client of Lea Tsemel's some time ago before the Israeli courts. I was going to start by asking Nahla and Lea about that experience, but since we all watched Advocate and Today, there have been rather, I would say, first encouraging and then shocking and tragic events of the last few weeks. Lea, I hope you and your family are safe. And will you tell us about these events from your perspective?
My perspective is quite, I wouldn't say narrow, but it concentrates on visiting detainees, representing young people in court, and trying to explain, to make sense of this mess around us. It's not so easy. The attitude of the court is very harsh. The general atmosphere in Israel is extremely right-wing. I would say tending to, we can already call many phenomena as fascism. And we are on the top of it. That's it. Everything blew up altogether. Maybe I'll relate later to the reasons, perhaps, how it happened, why it happened. It's very interesting. But I feel very lucky being a lawyer and being able to do something about the situation, rather than only participate in demonstrations or manifestations that are many around us nowadays. So, yeah, I'm in the midst of the turmoil, I would say.
Okay, good. Well, we'll come back to that. There was a story in Al Jazeera just this morning about more than 1,000 arrests being made in the Jerusalem area of people who participated in the event. So I guess you'll be busy.
Yeah, I am. I really am.
We can step back for a moment to what I mentioned earlier, was your experience working together as advocate and client. I guess you were the client, Nahla. Tell us a bit about it. What happened?
I really, until this moment, I have no idea what happened. I have no clue whatsoever why I was detained for, the days that I was detained. Believe me, until now, I have no clue whatsoever. All I know is I was a student and an active student at the university. And lo and behold, actually, after midnight, there was a raid on my house in Nazareth. And they, picked me up and took me to prison. And that was it.
So now, Nahla,
sorry.
Nahla, just to clarify, because not everyone might have picked that up. You said you were in Nazareth.
Yes.
That means then that you are a Palestinian citizen of Israel. You're not in the West Bank. You're in
No. I'm not in the West Bank. I'm Palestinian. I call myself 48 Palestinian, or Palestinian from the areas that were colonized in 1948. So yes, I have the Israeli citizenship, but my identity is, Palestinian. So yeah, I lived in Nazareth. I worked and studied actually at Haifa University at the time. And, you know, with my arrest, one day actually while I was there, Lea came to the prison, and you know, she's the only person actually, if I remember correctly, she's the only person that they allowed to get in. Maybe because she's strong and she knows her way and she knows how to tell them off. But the other Palestinian lawyers who volunteered and wanted to come actually were prevented from going in. I mean, my father was prevented and he was told all kinds of lies. So it's really fascinating to know all of the details and how Israel, you know, deceives people, deceives people, how Israel, you know, manipulates the whole thing. But, you know, Lea, the strength of this woman, by the way, is just incredible. She's a great woman who can, you know, push her way in regardless of, you know, the curses and the smears that, you know, the Israeli police and, you know, and security levy actually against her. She's such a strong soul that I loved her and I could not, you know, forget her. Or, you know, despite the fact that so many years have passed, Lea remains in my heart, not only in my mind, but also in my heart. So this is what I can tell about Lea, a great woman. Seriously, I love her.
I think that the reason that you were detained because you were a very active student and you well-spoken student. It was a good reason to arrest you at the time.
Okay.
And did you get off? Were you found not guilty, or what happened as a result?
You know, Israel will be very sad if at the end of all of these days, it will say they made a mistake. So because they didn't want to say they made a mistake by arresting me, they charged me with $1, one actually shekel at the time. Okay. So now what is the charge? No one knows. No, absolutely nobody knows.
Lea, you don't know.
Knows.
You don't know,
Lea
Lea?
is correct. Sorry?
Yeah.
Say, Lea, you don't know.
I cannot swear that I remember all the details. I just remember a very strong woman, very friendly, sitting in prison. I did visit her. I tried to find out what was it all about. It was about nothing. That I remember. That's it. And then...
So let me ask you this.
That's in a way.
One thing about the film was that I wasn't always clear whether the people you were defending were before the military court or the civil court. People would know that there are two different legal regimes, one in Israel proper and one in the territories, where it goes before military courts.
Also, both.
You work in both areas.
Yeah, of course, yes. What you saw in the movie were mainly the actual cases, the last cases, where one was in the District Court of Tel Aviv and the others were in the District Court of Jerusalem, inside Israel, not a military court.
Right.
Some of the older cases that you saw in the movie was in military courts.
And so you're able to work in both jurisdictions.
Of course.
Right. And what are the proportions roughly? Is it, we get the impression that it's much harsher and there's many more arrests in the territories.
It's very interesting because in the occupied territories, the military courts are there according to the already 53 years. It was established right after the occupation. As we realized later, they had a drawer plan for occupation, and they just took the plan from the drawer and had it right away. And according to the Geneva Convention, after the first days of the war, the occupying power is allowed to have military courts in order to act against the aggression of people under occupation, more or less, so to say. But it is very I would say, awkward and doesn't happen almost that you'll have it for so many years. So many tools of the Geneva Convention for the first days after the war are being used here for now so many years. And another very interesting aspect is the military regime that is formally also in the occupied territories has military courts, and it is permitted to rule over the population. But there are no more any Israeli settlers in military courts. For the settlers, there is also another apartheid system because they have special rule that enables the settlers being Israeli citizens or, listen, or people who could have become Israeli citizens according to the law of return. In other words, it's a nice washed way to say Jews. They would be sentenced in Israeli courts. So if a settler in Hebron, in Khalil, is attacking an army soldier, he will not be brought to a military court like his neighbor from Hebron, from Khalil, that the Arab neighbor will be brought to a military court. That settler will be brought to an Israeli court that is much milder with the settlers, understands better, has some civil rules, of course, regular civil rules, and there is a segregation, totally segregation, even in those, for those who are attacking the army, terrorizing the army, like many of the settlers do sometimes.
Lea, could I ask you a question, or for both of you perhaps, about the prisons themselves? Are they segregated? Are Jews and Palestinians in the same cells? Are they separated? How does that work?
It depends. Now, first of all, at the beginning, for the first 17 years of the occupation, the prisons were in the occupied territories. So we had the Ramallah prison and the Nablus prison and the Khalil prison and the Jenin prison and the Tulkarem prison and the Gaza prison, whatever you want. Later on, they decided that it's too difficult to have it and to rule it in the occupied territories. So they shifted all the Palestinian prisoners from the occupied territories into Israel. So the Palestinians who are sentenced by military courts are serving their times in Israeli courts, in courts inside Israel, which makes it, of course, very difficult for the families to visit, very difficult for lawyers from the West Bank to go into Israel and visit them in the prison. They will be sentenced in the military courts, but they will be kept inside Israel. And the military courts nowadays would be on the green, or what used to be the green line. They would be on the border line in order to serve both, to be able to sentence the Palestinians who live in the occupied territories, but to shift them to the Israeli courts.
Can I ask one more question, Arthur, and then I'll turn it back to you?
Feel free.
I know that Nahla has written a book about the prisons, the prison system. She has referred to quite dark instances of torture and so on. What's your experience about torture? In your movie, we saw the one kid being, you could call it torture. I mean, he was being browbeaten, a young kid and so on. That's one kind of torture. There's another kind of torture that's, I hate to grade levels of torture, but give us your impression of how widespread torture.
That boy was tortured by civilians around him. Some policemen were there. Those who were surrounding him, kick him after he was ran by a car in order to stop him. And they broke his skull, by the way. They kept, and he was bleeding there on the ground while they kept beating him, and others, the civilians, are calling for, in a very uncivilized way, kill him, kill him, kill him. But I'm not talking about that as torture. I'm talking about organized, prepared I would say, controlled torture of people during the interrogation. And you saw also in the movie that we won in 1999, we won a very, very important case that was forwarded to the Supreme Court of Justice by many Israeli human rights organizations, saying, first of all, the torture is systematic by the security services and it is illegal. That was the conclusion of the court. We won it. We were so happy. Although since then, it didn't pass away. They found milder way to torture. They found more trickier ways to do it. I will not go into all the details. It will take too much time. But torture is still being used, and even physical, very strong torture. And recently we had a case of a group from Ramallah who did, they are charged now for putting a bomb and blowing it up while civilians visited the occupied territories near the settlement that was taken by the settlement. Never mind, I will not go on into it also. And people were brutally beaten, hanged. People almost died during the interrogation from torture that is organized and permitted.
And
let me give you, may I?
Just one. We'll claim in the trial that it is illegal. We will bring it up as a major subject, of course, but the issue is there. The tortures are there. And another thing, just to finish this subject, another thing that replaces the torture is just the killing of people. It was legalized, and targeted killings are all the time.
If I may add, I would like to add a couple of experiences, actually. One is personal experience, and the other one is research experience. Personally, I remember, actually, I was taken to a place, and this is recorded in my book. I was taken to a room where they were torturing another Palestinian from Israel. He was a university student, but I didn't know him before. Anyway, they brought me to this young man, and they ordered him actually to sit on 4, and he sat on 4. And then they ordered him to walk on 4, and he did all of that in front of me. And then they asked him, "What's your name?" And he was very shy to say it, but then he did say Pudel. And then they placed 5 lit cigarettes in his mouth, 5 of them. Now, of course, he could not use any of his hands. He could not use, anything, and he had to wait until the 5 lit cigarettes actually were finished. That was one, unbelievable torture that happened in front of me. Sometimes they don't torture you directly, but indirectly as a message for you to, to know what might happen to you. This is one. When I was speaking to all of these women, I mean, brilliant women, the women who defy actually life. They're such strong Palestinian women from the West Bank, as well as
this was for your book, the research for your book. Is that right?
Yeah. The book on political prisoners, and they were telling the truth about their own torture. Something that Canadians would not even believe that something like this can happen to them. Sexual torture, physical torture, psychological torture, just name it, and it is there. This is especially between the late 60s actually until after even the Intifada. But my book stops at the Intifada and talks about the experiences of tremendous torture by all of these women. So I can go on, endlessly about this. So I'll leave the book for anyone who's interested, and perhaps get more questions to Lea to our beautiful guests here.
Which reminds me, so all the people who are listening and joined in, please send your questions to the Q&A file so that we can ask them later on. I assume that a lot of this torture is used to get confessions, which are then used in court against accused people. One of the statistics I come across regularly is that 98% of people charged under the military court regime are found guilty. That seems to me a very high percentage, but also doesn't leave a lot of room for not guilty verdicts. For you, Lea, how does that hit you that you're up against such difficult odds?
During those so many years, the security services have developed excellent systems how to get confessions from people, true or false, never mind, and base files on it. I wanted to mention also a case a long time ago, in 1972, where in that same prison where Nahla was held, the Kishon prison, there were a group of Jews and Arabs that also appear in the movie, who were sentenced for trying to make some common struggle with the Palestinians and with the Palestinians abroad, with Fatah at the time. And the discrimination, I would say, in the torture was so overt. There was the Jew, Rami Livne, had a very good friend, the Palestinian, from inside Israel, Shauki Khatib. And what they did in that Kishon prison, they brought Rami Livne to a room where Shauki was seated, connected to a battery of a car. And every time when Rami was asked a question, in order to make him speak, they used to electrify his very good friend, Shauki. So he was standing there. If he doesn't speak, they will electrify the Arab one. They will not electrify Rami himself, who was the son of a parliament member, but they would electrify Shauki in order to make Rami speak. This is one of a very, very dirty experience, but it happened. And of course, in military courts, the judges are officers of the court. Very often they are taken from chasing Palestinians outside into the court. But I cannot tell you that there is an enormous difference between the consequences in claiming torture in military courts or claiming it in Israeli courts. After all, the, I would say, patriotism of the courts is unanimous. It's everywhere. And if we bring up cases of torture, it's very rarely in order to get some kind of acquittal. No, it is to bring up the reality, to expose it. There are not too many acquittals, no.
Is Kishon the same as Jalami?
Jalami, it's Kishon, yeah.
Oh, okay, because I know it as Jalami.
That's it, yeah. This is the original Arab name, yeah.
Oh, I see.
So what does it...
Jerusalem is called now David, but it is the Kishle.
Oh.
Another prison.
So your, resilience and determination as shown in the film is absolutely remarkable. And especially in a situation where there are so few verdicts of not guilty. How I imagine
also regular courts
pretty discouraged.
Yeah.
How do you deal with it?
I know my fellow men as you say, the people, I know where I live. I know it very well. And we try to get the best out of it. I don't know. The best wouldn't be gaining a case, but sometimes presenting the reality, sometimes portraying the situation, and very often trying to give the defendants the honor and to turn them from terrorists, as everyone likes to call it, and terrorist became a daily word for every use, from terrorists to people who fight for the freedom. These are the attempts.
I wonder if I could ask a different question. Now, my impression is that you're really only dealing with criminal law. But the case of the home evictions in Sheikh Jarrah,
For instance, yeah.
where you don't deal with those directly, but can you go ahead and elaborate on them?
I will try. First of all, Sheikh Jarrah is not the only place in East Jerusalem that is looking forward for eviction. There are places in Silwan, and there are many others. I don't deal with it personally, as a decision I took many years ago. I cannot afford myself to have on my conscience another loss of land. Somehow, it's easier to get a life sentence than lose a dunam, an acre. Anyway, so I don't deal with it, but I can explain what it is. Briefly, because it's a long explanation. I'll try to do it briefly. You know that every time when there is a war and people fled or never come back, or something happened to them, and we know it very well from Europe, from the history of the Jewish people in Europe, when so many Jews died during the Second World War, their property went to the government somehow. They never came back to their houses. And some of the rules are, in such case, that once you have the property of the enemy, the state that conquered the place has the obligation, international obligation, to keep this property for some future arrangement. So there is an apotropos for the property of the enemy. There is one in Israel for the property of the Palestinians, who evicted all of a sudden so many neighborhoods everywhere in Jaffa, in Haifa, in Jerusalem. The most beautiful neighborhoods that we have in Jerusalem are originally Palestinians. I don't know how many of you know the places, but I would just say it's Baka, it's Musrara, many, many beautiful areas. Jaffa, of course. So the property was held by Israel, of course, for some future possibility of reconciliation and getting back the property. It was registered. You have the registration, you know how many acres everyone had, what was the house, etc., etc. The same was done in 48 by the Jordanians. There were Jews who lived in, let's say, the old city in Jerusalem. There were Jews who lived in Sheikh Jarrah, for instance, in different areas of Jerusalem. And once they left to the other side of the state, once they became Israelis and that land became Jordan, the Jordanians, guardian of the enemy property, had that property and ruled it and had to use it, had to keep the money for the future owners who will come someday, etc., etc. So the Jordanians settled refugees in those properties that they had, whereas the Israelis settled some higher rank, I would say, army officers who gained beautiful, really beautiful houses, and newcomers, people, immigrants, new immigrants who came after 48 to Israel from the Holocaust, etc. And for many years, it was formally organized like that, that it is the enemy's property, but you still keep it. Until 67. In 67, Israel, in the midst of the victory, very quickly sold that property to whoever lived there and took the money and kept it as formally for the future Palestinians to come and demand the property, of course. Whereas in East Jerusalem, for many years, we're talking now of more than 50 years, for the first 30 years, the Palestinians kept the same houses that were given to them by the Jordanians or by the Red Cross, etc. And little by little, the right wing demanded to regain what used to be the old Jewish property. The first one was Sharon, that used to be prime minister. He took back, so to say, a house in the old city of Jerusalem. It's very easy to see the house because it's usually with a big flag of Israel in it, in the Muslim area. And the Israeli legal system, little by little, allowed it. Whatever used to be before 48 Jewish property would be given back to the Jews. And this is the very hard work of right extremist groups who invest a lot of American money to buy property and also to redeem, I think they call it, to redeem the old Jewish property. Of course, there's no equality between the Palestinians in Israel and the Jews who take back their old land, like in Sheikh Jarrah. The court, Israeli court, confirms again and again and again and again that these people should be thrown away from those houses, and different organized Jewish groups, not the original inhabitants, not at all, just organized associations, Jewish associations, enter and take over.
Lea, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
To make sure I've understood from what you've said, and I've read it elsewhere, but I'm not 100% clear. Israeli law, or a combination of Israeli laws, mean that Jews can recover property that they owned, but Palestinians cannot recover property that they owned. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I see we have some questions lined up, and it's after the half hour. Grafton, are you standing by, ready to put some questions?
I am ready. There are a number of questions around, a number of people are asking whether you are quite alone in what you're doing, Lea, or whether there are other lawyers doing this kind of work. And a related question is, how do you go about deciding what cases you're going to take on? And if a lawyer such as yourself does not take on a case, is there a court-appointed lawyer?
Now, first of all, yes, there are. I'm very happy to say that there are quite many Israeli Jewish lawyers who deal with these problems. Many of them are organized in humanitarian organizations. There are big ones, smaller ones. but very active, and there are very active women and men lawyers who work on it. Yeah, in this sense, it's all right. I'm not alone at all. There are, of course, many Palestinian lawyers also, many, but I'm happy to say that there are new generations of lawyers, women and men, that work on the same issues. How do I decide whether to take or not take a case? It depends. The moment the case, the criminal case, or they call it a terrorist case, relates or comes from the intention of national struggle, I will take it. Sometimes it's very difficult, but I will take it. I will not deny defending it. And there are also nominations, not by the court. Nowadays, we have in Israel a public defense system organized by the Ministry of Justice. And also this case, whoever doesn't have a defense, a proper defense, and of course is entitled to have a defense, will, and is poor enough, will get the defense by the public defense. So I'm also part of that system.
Thank you. One attendee wonders, does the average Israeli know that this torture is happening during interrogations in prison?
Oh, it's a very hurting question, because for so many years, we believed that the only thing you have to do is to talk about it, to expose it, to tell it to the public, you don't know what's going on. This is what's going on. It's immoral. And then the belief was that the public will react out of moral. It didn't happen. It did not happen. And we realized, or I realized at least, that it's not very easy to convince people that it is wrong, only by bringing the facts to them. Don't forget that every Israeli is obliged to serve in the army. And once you serve in the army, sooner or later you'll be exposed to the atrocities. So it's hard to say that the Israelis don't know about it. They know about it. They are part of it. There is, for instance, a very important group, not very big, but very important group of people who used to serve in the army, and they recollect their terrible experiences. They talk about it. They spread it all over. They issue books about it, Fighters for Peace. And the impact exists, but it does not change reality, because the big majority is not part of it. They are, not only are they, I would say, indifferent, sometimes they are even, like now in the war, in the attack on Gaza, you would hear many Israelis saying it is not enough. You have to exterminate them. Do more. Don't stop the war, etc. There were many Israelis who were against the ceasefire. Many, too many. They wanted to really crush Gaza to ashes.
If I may add, actually, I strongly believe the turn, and a huge turn into the right wing, into fascism, has been happening in Israel for the past perhaps 20 years or so. The kind of settlers that they are bringing into the occupied territories of 1967, and the ones that they bring from there into inside 48, especially in Led and Nazareth in Haifa, as well as Al-Fahim and others. They bring them to terrorize the Palestinians there. I mean, these scenes we've never seen before. So the move to fascism within the Israeli society and, you know, super racism, if there is such a thing as super racism, is just unbelievable. And what is happening now, you know, as we are speaking, is exactly this, namely the use of the settlers, actually, use of the settlers to come in aid of the Israeli police. So settlers are themselves protected by the police. Both of them are, you know, oppressing the Palestinians who are Israeli citizens right now. And this is something we've never, you know, seen before, we've never witnessed before or experienced before. And that is, you know, just to talk about Israel as a settler colonial state. We need to understand it in this context. You know, Israel is not any state. It's not just apartheid. Apartheid South Africa had the blacks, the Africans on one side, the whites on the other side. In this case, actually, it's not, you know, just this way, because those were also living and working, the blacks, you know, working with white South Africa. Israel works as an apartheid totally differently because of its settler colonial presence. Because of that, it was able to bring, you know, settlers from all over the world. Now, these are not, you know, really human beings who come with one purpose: kill the Arabs. And this is a sign that now you are seeing in so many places: kill the Arabs, get rid of them, finish them. So this is how, you know, many Palestinians are living right now. And when they talk about, you know, 1,000, I don't know if the 1,000 of people arrested only in Jerusalem, because I know that in Al-Fahim, in Nazareth, in Haifa, in Led, etc., there are a lot of, you know, Palestinians, again, citizens of Israel, who are taken into prison right now, who are being detained right now, and who have been the victims of these, you know, fascist settlers that Israel brought from the West Bank to inside.
I think published everywhere, but I will relate to it because I had the personal experience also, and I represented many of the people who were detained in Sheikh Jarrah, in that neighborhood. Now, during the Ramadan, every evening, the people who came, also many Israelis amongst them, who came to identify with the Sheikh Jarrah people, with those families who are about to be evicted by the decision of the Israeli Supreme Court. They had the habit of having an iftar, the meal, breaking the fast meal, there, just sitting there. And there is this terrible picture. You see a beautiful table put outside with many, many, many bottles of water and the plates to have the first meal after the fast. And all of a sudden, when people just sit down to eat, the settlers who took the house opposite are coming and spraying with gas all the celebrating so-called people. And then the people near the table started to throw the food on the settlers in order to keep them away. And even some plastic chairs that they had. And most of those Palestinians were detained one by one, because everything was photographed, of course. There are cameras everywhere. And we didn't see really, maybe one or two of those attacking settlers were detained and then released. And of course, you know about the clearly fascist supporter of Kahana, parliament, newly elected parliament member that was not elected before, but now it passed. It was possible for Ben-Gvir to become a parliament member with the support of Netanyahu, a very warm support of Netanyahu. He built his office.
let me just interrupt because I'm not sure that everybody on the line will know who or what you're referring to. You referred to the kahanas party, but just say a word about what that is, because that may
Go
not.
ahead.
Yeah.
Speak.
You, I don't dare speak because I'll say something wrong. You explain what it is.
Okay, so a kahana, a rabbi kahana, used to be a movement. The slogan was only like this, only this way, rak kach. And with the
Fist. Fist.
This was the
Fist.
sign.
Fist. Yeah.
The fist was the sign, of course. And the young kahanis started in the United States. The movement started in the United States. They used to have training camps in order to be very strong Jews, as Jews should be. And then they came and they started to be very popular in the Kiryat Arba, the settlement in Hebron area. And they had many supporters. Later on, he was killed, as you know, in the United States. But they had many supporters. Then at that time, when they ran for the elections, they were forbidden because of their racism. But now it's kosher. It's already kosher and proper for one of his students to be a parliament member. So that parliament member built his so-called office, because he has immunity as a parliament member, in Sheikh Jarrah, just opposite the houses that are to be evicted. And it started a new turmoil.
Thank you.
Lea, where do you find hope in that situation? Is there a positive side to it at all?
Look, the positive side is what I want to believe, the human nature. It must end. That's what I feel. And the Palestinians have to have the freedom. Eventually, they will, sooner or later. I hope it will not be with a very expensive price, but I believe in I would say, the way history acts. And I believe that finally it will be solved somehow. As I said, I don't know the price. But you cannot oppress people for so long and believe that you will succeed.
Grafton, have we got time to squeeze in a few more questions, Aaron?
Yes, in fact, that's a good intro to a question to both Nahla and to Lea. Do you prefer a two-state or a binational state or a one-state, or what solution do you prefer as the most ethical solution?
If I may actually respond to this question. This is a very complex question, as we all know. Now, the whole idea of a two-state solution has been tried again and again, for the longest time. There was Oslo. Oslo failed totally. There was so-called, Palestine in the West Bank and Gaza. It never took off. It never worked, actually. After Oslo, the amount and number of settlers that were brought and placed in the West Bank has been tremendous number. I think close to, if I'm not mistaken, close to 800, 900,000, if not more, already living there. And these are living there not in the air or in the sky. They're living on land that has been stolen from the Palestinians, land that has been stolen from the proprietors of this land, kicked out, and they built their settlements there. So once again, I mean, two-state means that Israel need to get totally out of Jerusalem, East Jerusalem, as well as, out of the West Bank, and, the areas even around the Gaza Strip. Is Israel willing to do that? Definitely no. Now, the introduction of this, Jewish law, actually, just a couple of years ago, has made things even worse. Israel is looking for a Jewish state, throughout, as we say, or as others say, actually, from the river to the sea. Now, from the river to the sea, we have right now, a fully Jewish perception of the area. Now, you need to get rid of that kind of perception.
Nahla, we're running out of time, and I wonder if Lea would like to answer that question.
I don't know if the two-state solution, just as Nahla, I don't know if it will work. Of course, I will support a state of total equality. One man, one vote. No superiority of the Jews. Equality, just the very simple meaning of equality. Equal people with equal rights and with equal needs. How will it work? I don't know. If by dividing it two states, ahlan wa sahlan. If not, one state is fine. The fight is so elementary. The vision is so elementary to everyone in what democracy is. How we will get there, I don't really know, but I know we should get there.
Lea, based on all the Palestinians you've dealt with, how widespread would you say is anti-Semitism in the Palestinian population that you deal with?
I don't think it exists. I think as such. And nowadays the law against terror was amended, and now everything is called terror, and there is a double punishment for racist crime. So nowadays the daily vocabulary is racism. They are attacking Jews for racist reasons. They are anti-Semite. It's been said again and again, not only in the United States as we hear it on our media, but also in Israel. And it really drives me crazy, because I know very well that there is no anti-Semitism among the Palestinians. But Israel prefers to call it anti-Semitism because it's a nice slogan. Oh, they're anti-Semite. We've always been terrorized by anti-Semites. No. If there is a fight against the Israelis, it's nothing to do with the being Jewish. It's to do with the being occupiers. And that makes the whole difference.
I agree.
I would add something to this. I'm afraid all the time, and I feel responsible as an Israeli to anti-Semitism that is being spread in the world against Jews, because we Israelis demand the world to believe that we represent the Jews. I don't think we do. I think we are only causing them more agony by our attitude as Israelis. And I'm afraid that part of the, yes, probably growing anti-Semitism in the world or reaction towards Jews is based on us, on our attitude towards the Arabs, on our attitudes towards our minorities, and to our racism.
Grafton, any salient questions waiting to be asked?
Marianne asks of Lea, do you feel the work you are doing is an expression of your Jewish faith, or do you see yourself as secular?
I am secular, but of course I grew up as a Jew, and I know very well the sources, and I think I collected the positive things in the very long Jewish tradition. It's not that you chose us because we are the best. No, It's you should love thy, I don't know how to say it in English, you should love your
Neighbor as
Neighbor as you love yourself.
as yourself, and what is, you never do to the other what is bad for you.
Mhm.
These are the basic rules for me, of Judaism. And it's very easy to go according to it. Being secular as well.
We're moving into final territory here now. I just wanted to thank, first of all, thank Arthur Milner for the idea. He came up and suggested that OFIP take on circulating this tremendous film. And Arthur, thank you for that. And then also the brilliant idea of getting Lea to see if she would talk to us, which is, and then on top of that, we had Nahla, who had actually had personal experience from a Palestinian point of view of working with Lea. So thank you to all three of you for that.
Thank you, Nahla. Thank you, all of you. Really, thank you for listening so well.
Thank you to Grafton for his technical work behind. I suggest to all of you, don't leave yet. I suggest to all of you that if you go down at the bottom right where it says where the chat is, if you click on the three little dots and you get save chat, there you will get saved onto your computer, the chat, which includes the bio of Lea, the bio of Nahla Abdo, also the reference to the Israeli group called Breaking the Silence, which I believe Lea was referring to earlier. We will be sending a copy of this. This is being live streamed on YouTube. We will also be sending a copy of it to all of you so that you can share it with your friends if you want. On behalf of Ottawa Talks Israel Palestine, I want to thank especially our invited guest, Lea Tsemel. I think Toda Rava is pretty close to the way I'm supposed to say it. So
It is.
okay, thank you so
And
much.
Nahla,
Peter, can I just say,
see you finally soon.
it was a fair bit of work, but it was all worth it just to get to know Lea a bit. And thank you very much, Lea, for existing.
Thank you for having.
We did ask participants to contribute towards our costs, and we've raised a fair bit more than that. And I promised that anything extra we raised would go to an organization of Leah's choice. So I encourage all the people listening to send a contribution. And Lea, you have to tell us where you would like that.
Yeah, I can think of, there is a Center for Human Rights that is very active, Hamoked, perhaps there.
Maybe
Okay.
the easiest thing, Arthur, is other than send it to you, and you could forward one chunk to Lea. Would that work?
Yes, absolutely. And we'll make it Hamoked. Thank you. Thank you, Lea. What a pleasure.
Thank you very, very much. It was nice to see you from this distance.
Thank you.
I hope
Keep safe,
the
everybody.
best of all of us.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Lea. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Arthur, for this
Bye.
webinar. It was really worth it. Well, I knew from the very beginning bringing Lea here is more than worth it. So thank you, Lea. I love you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.